Hey guys, Rob from Georgia here with you, aka VHS82 apostrophe with the first episode of season 2. Season 1 is behind. Season 2 is going to begin to unfold now. Dude, man, I'm so loving this. I'm so loving the fact I got this for Father's Day, man. Dude, I am just falling in, and I know this show is gonna begin to have its ups and downs and whatnot, but I thought this first episode really started off with a really great sort of bang. Even with some of the issues I'm going to mention here shortly, but first thing I want to mention though, I review for Body Bags YouTube channel, and we've started recently this collaborative effort of within our group. Aside from just reviewing films every day, we've started this thing where on a Friday night we'll get together and we have a topic and we'll spend a few hours going around. It's a top 5 sort of based long form conversation, a roundtable discussion of sorts. But the one we just had Friday night had to do with physical media and why it matters. We all took a different distribution company, and I took Anchor Bay. We all just moved forward and for about 3 hours or whatever. And but that link is right down there below. If that's something that will interest you, a couple of guys just talking physical media and why it's so stinking important, man. I would not be doing this review at all if it wasn't for having this in my hand. This makes everything possible for me because I'm not going to sit there and stream it and just reviews. Anyways, Walking Dead. So this is an interesting episode to open up the season with. If you dig into it just a little bit, you'll find out that there were two what were they called? I got so many notes, man. There was going to be two. It was going to open up with 2 episodes back to back, I guess. Miles Behind Us. And then What Lies Ahead, which is what ends up happening, is we just start off with What Lies Ahead. And apparently, because of budgetary reasons, they scrapped that idea in favor of just the main content of What Lies Ahead and begin with that. But one of the consequences or losses of that idea was the loss of the scene as they escape the CDC and are going to, before they can get out of Atlanta completely, they decide let's stop by that nursing home from that episode, Vetas, and seek sanctuary there, at least until they get their bearings and they can move out. Well, that scene was never, that scene was completely pulled back. And now, thankfully, though, it is a deleted scene on here, which is absolutely fantastic. And for so many reasons. But, I listened to it. I watched it a few times, but I listened to it once with the producer commentary. And it's so frustrating, because he'll sit there and just talk about, well, it was best we didn't use it, for this reason and that reason and this. And but some of this has to do with just not trusting the audience to get it, or too many people coming into season 2, episode 1 aren't going to get this nod, that nod, and this nod. So screw the people who watched all of season 1. We can't get anything that we can really sink our teeth into. And so it's just that kind of attitude, and I just wonder if this is sort of represents a sort of beginning of a very, 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 very slow death to this idea. But on the flip side of that, this thing runs 11 seasons and so many spin-offs, and so it's hard. But it's like those people who just can't stand Prometheus or Covenant. It's too I guess intellectually based, or it just demands too much from its audience. They would rather spend a few hours, nothing wrong with it, but a few hours, in the theater watching Alien Romulus. it's a little bit easier to enjoy. You don't really have to think much about it. But if you have never seen that lost deleted scene of their, they basically get into the nursing home and they realize that all of the occupants have been killed, execution style, and then left as food for the zombies. And it's hard to really get into it, without spending the next 8 hours. But it lays a great groundwork for things that will happen in what lies ahead, between certain characters and motivations, whether going back, looking forward in the present moment, connecting pieces. Like there's a great moment where between Andrea and Dale in the nursing home that just sort of foreshadows the conversation they're going to have in what lies ahead, when she basically blames him for not allowing her to choose her way of, well, as Darrow puts it later, opting out, right? And that's what Jenner put it, right? Opting out. And that conversation gets really feisty, man. And there's a few of those. There's another moment in the nursing home where Darrow, the walkers are starting to show up, and Darrow just looks at Sophia, and is it basically just tells Carol, keep her mouth shut or I'll shut it, right? Well, that sets up a perfect connecting piece to when Sophia ends up lost in the woods. This is what motivates him to take on the brunt of wanting to find her, or at least that was the intention, right? This becomes mostly upon Rick now, though Daryl's with him. And so it's like things like that just, I don't know, man, it just, and to hear the producer constantly whine and, this is not going to get it, and they're not going to get this, and they're not going to get that, and this is half the problem with filmmaking. This is half the problem with it, is there's not a lot of trust between, those pulling the purse strings of the creative influences, be it the director or whatnot, and the audience. I don't know, there's just, it's sort of messed up, but that scene really does lay some, there's a great moment there, lost, a deleted scene that is lost, where Rick has been out there by himself looking for Sophia, and when he comes back to the group on the highway, they're like, Carol sees him coming without Sophia, and of course Rick is at a loss. He's like, where's Sophia? And she's like, you did not bring and it just creates this incredible moment that is just so it just yanks your heart right out, and Rick just ends up walking away like this is his fault. Now we do get some of that in what lies ahead, as separately, which works works well enough. But some of the things, and there's a great deleted scene too, where Carol is it's in the middle of the night, and you see might be T-Dog, I think, posting guard, and Carol's just staring into the darkness of the woods, wondering where's Sophia. So anyways, all that to say is, that what this could have started off could have been really, really phenomenal. But set that aside, this episode ends up being really freaking pretty good, if you ask me. It's, boy, how do I do this? Okay, so I want to just first of all, watching in black and white is freaking phenomenal. It does not let up on how awesome it looks aesthetically in black and white. And kudos to David Boyd, who we're going to lose soon here as cinematographer. His ability to get the close-ups on faces, man, and expression and emotion is just amazing. Amazing. Okay, so I think I just want to, real quick, so the season premiere begins, and without the nursing home thing, we're on a highway, and we're driving, right, and we have to stop because of congestion on the highway. There's just too many overturned cars, trucks, and whatnot. Plus, Dale blows a hose in the RV, whatever, right? And so they've stopped for a moment. Well, this, as they're trying to get their bearings, this leads to a freaking phenomenal moment, man, were a herd of walkers. And now this is a great nod to Land of the Dead. And if you remember the moments at the end of Land of the Dead, this herd, they're just walking in herds now, which I think is an interesting aesthetic. It's something really cool when they can start allowing the dead to just take on their own sort of weird animalistic qualities. That took a long time for Romero to sort of, but you know, his is the template, right, for all of this mess, you know, so we can sort of skip right to it. It took him to what, Survival of the Dead before we see zombies feasting on a horse, but here there's an autopsy scene when we're pulling the head of a chipmunk out of the zombie's stomach, which is so great, and it won an Emmy for practical effects for the prosthetic work of Greg Nicotero. K&B cannot be just screamed enough, man. The work of K&B is just so phenomenal. So this whole hurt, this leads to a great moment where Andrea ends up being she's working on reassembling, putting together her gun that her dad had given her, and it's a great moment, man, for the camera, because man, she's just like really intent on looking at her weapon. She's sitting in the RV, but in the window right, you know, next to her face, we can see, you know, the horde or herd of zombies starting to walk by. And of course, out of the corner of her eye, you can imagine, like any of us would, she, you know, catches it and begins to slowly turn. Well, this leads to her locking herself in the bathroom in the RV. Well, this zombie, this one great moments, man. This zombie comes in and he is just, man, just checking things out, man, in a way that just has a sense of liveliness to the zombie that you don't get a lot in movies, I think. And when he, as a result of her dropping something, his attention is drawn back to the bathroom when he had walked away from. And the zombie realizes there's someone in there, right, man? So he starts coming through. This is a great moment because it's sort of a throwback to Zombie and the whole lock yourself in the closet deal and the ultimate splinter of the eye effect. You don't get that here. In fact, you get the opposite. You get Andrea putting a screwdriver, compliments of Dale, who's help from above. I didn't even think about that. So Dale's up on top, right? And so he, you know, and she's looking up at him, and you know, it's like with great reservations that it's like, well, I gotta lean on you now, because we'll find out that she is just harboring some real anger at him for throwing the guilt on her and forcing her to leave with him, because she really just wanted that to be her way out of this hellhole that is this apocalyptic place, right? And I didn't even think about it until now, but Dale is sort of that godlike figure up top, and she's looking up and she doesn't know if she wants to receive help or not receive help, because she's got all this built up anger and resentment and regret and everything else. And yet he drops a screwdriver, which becomes her salvation, at least in the moment, and allows her to basically, you know, take the zombie out. And I just thought, well, that sort of segues into what already is an incredible episode that really is just delving deeply into some really interesting biblical ideas. I'm trying to, my notes are scattered all over the place. You start with the Lost Veritas nursing home scene, right, where they're in the nursing home, and you see on the door this stenciled in there, prayer changes everything. And of course, Daryl has this comment of, how'd that work out for you? You know, looking at the guy that's on the floor, right? There's a scene where Shane finds water in the truck on the highway, a whole ton of supply of water. He uses the word, mentions being baptized. The term flesh is used, which you find in scripture as opposed to the spirit. The findings refuge in the church, which has its own really interesting ideas going on. Outside of it, you have on the board is two things of great interest. Revelation 16:17, which I went ahead and did the homework for you, but it is the final bowl, pouring out of the bowl in Revelation. during the apocalypse. And you have here the seventh, verse 17, then the seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple of heaven and from the throne, saying, "It is done." If you look down below into the notes here, in these verses, you get this notion that the last bowl is a conclusive act of judgment. A loud voice from God's throne declares it is done. Cosmic signs of God's presence are manifest, evoking Mount Sinai and other theophanies, quite similar to those of the last trumpet. And it gets into the discussion of great earthquakes and eventually the fall of Babylon, right? But I find it interesting how grand of a statement is that in terms of what is all happening in this episode and the stage they're setting for what's coming down the pike. Now, right to the side of that sign is another sign that says, "Bikers welcome," which is cool because at the beginning of the episode, you see Daryl on a chopper with his, will come to be, his famous vest. And it's almost kind of like, so Andrea has a second chance, when Dale drops a screwdriver, that help from on high. You've got this, Daryl sees the sign. In fact, his comment from the deleted scene to in the church goes from, how did that work for you, to now, you can take it a few ways, but he does look at Christ, which is another weird thing now that I think about it. This is a Baptist church. We should not be seeing Christ on the cross. That is mainly a Catholic type thing. And to see Christ on the cross, I didn't even think about that until just now. You're all gonna have to forgive me if this episode runs a little long. I'm just sorry. You're gonna have to forgive me because I'm having things pop off at me. So you're in a Baptist church. You should not see Christ on the cross. You generally don't see that in Protestantism. What does that signify? Suffering. He's suffering on the cross, and the suffering that is happening here in this world. If you notice, Sophia has a t-shirt on that has a rainbow t-shirt, which signifies God's promise never to destroy the earth again with water. And yet here we are in the apocalypse, and this is somehow, at least in this moment, I don't, in terms of the comic books and the grand scheme of the show and where it'll eventually head, but in this moment, some of the suggestive qualities of what's going on in this, in terms of the grand picture, is really quite suggestive. And it just makes you wonder what all the creative juice is going into this and what they were wanting, because there are way too many things going on in here for anything other than God's judgment raining on the world. This is what gets chosen rather than the great deluge, the flood, right? Watered, which is promised will never happen again. And that's another thing. That's the other thing that's weird, is because where does Rick hide Sophia momentarily as she runs off the highway? As she runs off the highway, because it's during that herd of walkers, and he goes after her, and eventually Daryl will catch up with him. Where does he hide Sophia? He hides her in the water under a root system along the dike, or the edge, right? And so she's in the water, and the point is to save her through almost like Noah-like, right? And the ark, and salvation through, water. Yet this also represents, a promise, but it also represents death, because this is how, to that point of view, this is how the world was destroyed, or the reset button was hit for multiple reasons. And so you just got so many things working on in here. It is quite amazing. But the charity to Daryl to change your attitude, change internally of who you are as a person. You need to change these things. Maybe that is the bikers welcome could be flipped and just be a mockery. The church bells, I thought hearing the church bells, which isn't a real bell. And of course, as they go into the church, hoping and thinking Sophia might be there, being the one maybe possibly ringing the bells, right? They find, which is really creepy, man. They find three walkers just sitting in the pews, staring at Christ. well, contemplatively, just the suggestion is they're staring at Christ. And when the first zombie turns his head back and sees Rick and them, dude, he looks like he's probably the pastor of the place, which is really creepy. And then you got this lady who's got this like veil thing over her face. I mean, she just looks really creepy. And the other guy too, man. Well, they dispatch him pretty quick. But then you get this whole moment where a few of them take moments where they pray before Christ, who is on the cross, which again you shouldn't see in a Baptist church. You shouldn't see Christ on the cross. It's interesting. And you've got Carol's prayer and pleading for forgiveness, for praying for Ed's death, and now thinking that maybe God is invoking justice on her daughter. It's just heart-wrenching. And then, of course, Rick's plea as leader of the group and admitting his faith has been misplaced. Perhaps it's been misplaced. It's been placed in other things that he found, and probably still to a degree, it is important. I mean, be it your family and your job and these things that you just hold near and dear to you, begs the question, where should our faith be placed, and what does that look like exactly? Should it be placed proportionately, right? And so there's, some great moments, and then you got the whole thing between Shane and Laurie. Shane makes the decision to basically leave the group at some point, in which Andrea overhears. She wants to join him, and which he's not that excited about. You've got just so many things happening, and I see my time. I'm sure I mentioned a lot of these already. I just want to kind of just take a quick big. I think I mentioned a lot already. There's a few interesting things in here. In the RV, there's a placard or whatever on the wall. How about a nice cup of shut the hell up? It is pretty funny. There was also too, Sophia being hidden in the water like she was reminds you of Predator. I thought that was pretty interesting when Arnold hides himself where he does. Of course, when all this happens, they're heading towards Fort Benning, should be mentioned. And of course, they will get severely derailed as a result of the loss of Sophia, which brings us to the very end of the episode and this incredible visual moment of Carl has joined Rick and Daryl in hunting for Sophia, and there's a moment where they see a deer. I'm pretty sure it's a buck. Just a massive creature. But there's a great moment between Carl and the deer where the deer is allowing Carl to approach. At first they're going to hunt it or they're going to shoot it for food. But Carl takes a step towards and Daryl and Rick are amused enough. They want to see this play out. Unfortunately, to Carl's detriment, or perhaps salvational moment. What does Rick plead for? Nothing more than a simple nudge from God. He doesn't have to have all the answers in the world, but he needs a nudge from on high, like Andrea receiving the screwdriver from Dale, right? And sometimes these things come clothed in ways that we would never in a million years imagine, but it's practical in the sense that this is what needs to happen to move you out of this situation to the next situation. And where is it going to be? To a farm with a man named Herschel who still is clinging greatly to his faith. So it's just a lot of interesting notions, and to see where ultimately all of this, this is in great contrast to Jenner, who, has been hidden away for a month and ultimately in the end sees absolutely no hope and decides that his life existence must end. Jackie joins him, and Andrea wishes she could have joined him, which, leaves just an awkwardness between her and Dale, right? But as Carl approaches the deer, a shot rings out, the deer goes down, Carl goes down. There is a hunter out there who does not see them, does not see Carl, just sees the deer. He's been hiding away back in the woods, aiming at the deer in this moment leading up. And as a result, the episode ends. But the idea, I think, is that Rick's plea has been answered in a way that seems totally opposite. Like, I just begged, and now my son is shot. But again, this leads you to another place. This leads you to the next point of their journey. And, you know, so I don't know. I guess I'm going to end it there pretty much. It's 25. I didn't realize, just so much in here. Man, this is a nice jumping off platform to the episodes that will come. And we'll see how things go with this. Again, then, you know, the walkers in the church reminds you of Dawn of the Dead. The being drawn back to a mall, not knowing what else to do. Yet, in contrast to those who replace them in the church, who pray, active, be it, you know, out of desperateness, a sense of pleading before God for something, versus the dead who just sit there and aimlessly look and have probably no conception at all in what they're looking at. But again, goes back to this idea that Christ up on the cross should have never been in a Baptist church. That is, I don't know why none of us, I caught that when we're all watching it together. And that's another thing, me and my boys, we are still watching the Walking Dead in black and white. And we all watched it the other night. I can't believe that never hit us on any level at all. It's interesting. So anyways, hopefully this wasn't, I didn't mean it to be this big of a deep dive. It's just what poured out of me. So it is for what it is. I hope you listen to the whole thing. And, you know, kudos to my dogs for a second week in a row looking pretty good. Got a long football season ahead of us. Long season. But remember, this is out there, man, to be had. And you know, things like that are going to start filling up your shelves because we're getting close to that October season. And as always, man, just thanks for listening. Thanks for, just being part of this. As always, we end these things off with go Dogs and go Bills.
This is not a dream. Not a dream. It might be useful to